Welcome to the show with no name that we'll talk about in a second.
It felt good.
Yeah, you like the Wiggles?
Yeah.
We got a different vibe tonight. This is a nighttime podcast.
It's a nighttime. It's after dark.
What does fear cause people to do?
And I think the obvious is it makes people get controlling, grip onto things that they know and can predict. There tends to be a sense of urgency around things that doesn't necessarily need to be there. And I also think there's a lot of judgment involved. I think when somebody's living in fear, they're judging everyone and everything around them as well as themselves.
I think people just start to take actions that aren't in line with who they actually are.
Mm-hmm.
And they do things to make the situation that they're in easier in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
I think that fear makes people react instead of respond. And it puts people in situations that have lots of potential outcomes, yet they can only see one door to walk through because their vision has sort of gone into this tunnel.
Yeah.
Just like
what happens in fight or flight.
Exactly. The exact same thing, right? We just limit our options and we don't see all the offerings that are being put in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
What are some ways that we can start to deal with the fear?
I can start by saying, I don't know if this is a way to deal with fear, but I can say that I built a life around me because of fear. Like I put all of these things into my life that I thought I was supposed to do to like be a good American. I don't know, like, get a degree, get married, like all of the things, have friends that act and look and do certain things.
Capitalist.
Sure. I was a real basic bitch. And I knew for a really long time, years, a decade, maybe longer than that's not who I was and that's not how I wanted to be living. But I was so afraid that the life that I had created for myself or the people around me would leave me if I like exposed what I really wanted to be doing. And what ended up happening is those people did leave me, but it's because I started acting so insane because I was like backed into a corner with fear and like just kind of exploding with not living in the way that I wanted to. I just started hurting people. And so I think that the thing that you fear is going to happen a lot of times does end up happening because you in different ways.
The lesson is going to be learned one way or another.
So do you want to do it the painful way or do you want to do it?
Yeah. So let's talk about then, I guess, the peer pressure that causes some fear.
Okay.
How or when did that start happening for you?
I have a very clear turning point where things really started to be obvious to me that it was not the right path. And I was in grad school. And after the didactic portion, I realized that like, I hate this and I do not want to spend another X amount of years completing this degree. And so I started telling people I wanted to leave grad school. Like I would just kind of say, hey, I'm thinking about doing something different or, maybe I'll just kind of leave with a master's or whatever. And I would just gauge their reactions. And people were always like, no, stick with it. You can do this. Like, this is what you want. This is what you're meant to do. Like, we're so proud of you. And anytime I would push a little bit further into, no, I think I want to like coach. Like, I want to do fitness stuff. People would be like, you should stay in grad school. Like, that's such a good career. You're going to make so much money, blah, blah, blah. Like, it was never even a little bit positive on the other side. It was always just like, don't give up. You can do this. Push yourself. We know you can do it.
And why did you listen to those voices?
Because I didn't trust myself. I felt like if I didn't follow this clear path that everybody was giving me all these accolades for, then they wouldn't accept me anymore. They would be mad at me.
So is it fear of not achieving?
No, it's like I was saying, it's fear of being cast out, of being not part of something. You know, like a lot of my friends are academics in medicine, and like that's like kind of the world I grew up in. And like, if you decide you want to do something different, then that you become the black sheep.
I think our culture has such specific expectations of people.
Yeah.
And anyone who chooses not to go down the path that the majority of other people are going down is cast out until they find success.
100%. I absolutely agree with that.
And then in that moment, those people are celebrated almost more than anyone else is. And it's interesting because there's a giant disconnection there, because people want to see others go off this beaten path and do something new and be wild and crazy. And at the same time, they punish them when they start walking that path.
Yeah. There's a lot of judgment. That's what I think when people are operating out of fear, there's a lot of judgment, because it's like, you're doing something that I am incapable of doing right now, and I can't watch it happen.
Because I want what you have?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that.
So what are some tools that we can, or what's something that we can do to overcome that specific fear, that fear of judgment from other people? So one thing is just knowing yourself.
Yeah.
And that ultimately takes a lot of self-reflection and a lot of sitting down and writing down values and principles and things that are important to you, things in your life that happened that you want to replicate or stay away from.
Yeah.
So one way that you can do that, something that I did, although I've stopped doing it now, is a daily reflection. So at the end of the day, bust out your journal and write down. I used to do 3 things that happened that were good, that like I did something and I liked the outcome, or somebody did something for me, like just something positive that happened that I wanted to remember. And then 2 things that I could have done better, or that didn't go like I thought that they would go. And then at the end of the week, I flipped through each day and I would write down the important ones and typically I would do like 3 to 5 from each.
Yeah.
Then at the end of the month, I would go through all of my weeks and write down 3 to 5 from the month. And then at the end of the year, I would go through each of the months and write down 3 to 5. And that is really how I got to know myself in a big way.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of what prompted me being willing to take the different path. Because I saw how clearly I was different from everything that was going on around me.
Yeah.
So that's one big one.
I think you could even if you didn't want to take that as the first step, you could just journal. Like that is really helpful. And I'm pretty anti-journaling, but it's because it shows me that I'm saying the same things over and over and not changing them. So it's just like reflecting on a larger scale. Like you journal and then read back through it every couple of months. And then if you're anything like me, you see the same things over and over. And it was even just year to year, like every January, same stuff coming up.
Another good one that popped into my brain as we were talking is an obituary exercise. So the obituary exercise, if you're not familiar, it's all over the place at this point, but just writing your own obituary in the way that you want to be remembered. So that really helps to remember that we have limited time and you're not going to be here forever. And there are things on this planet worth doing. And if you want your obituary to read like you wrote it, you're going to have to overcome the fear that is sitting in you. And you know that it's what you want because it's what you wrote. And so the only thing that's stopping you from achieving that thing is this fear.
I think also practicing saying things that other people might not agree with and walking away from it still like feeling that opinion is really important. Just doing it in really small ways and building up that tolerance, because I think like you can journal and see how you're not aligned all you want, but when it comes down to it, you have to actually make the change and you have to face what people are going to say to you. And that part is really hard. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I took steps forward and then I started getting opinions and was like, brought it back.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, rehearsing specific conversations can help there. Like if you know that's coming, but more, I think, speaking to what you're saying, there's a Stoic named Seneca who had a practice, and I'm going to butcher the words here, but he says something in the writing like eating the scantiest of fare and wearing the somethingest of cloth. I can't remember what it is. Maybe scantiest. No, if that was fair. I can't remember. Doesn't matter. Anyway, this is one of the richest dudes in ancient Greece. Mm-hmm. And he would occasionally put on the cheapest robes, like beggar's robes, and eat what he could find in the street for days at a time, because that was his way of showing himself that if all this stuff that I have goes away, I'm still the same man that I was when I had it all. Mm-hmm. And so experiencing what it's like to have nothing, right? I think a lot of the times the fear, like we said, is money driven, or it's a fear of being alone and not having any support or help. And we get nervous or worried about how we're going to provide for ourselves. If you've practiced that and you know that you still exist and you didn't die and everything's okay, and even when people did see you in your shitty robes, they didn't kill you, mm-hmm. then it makes it a whole lot easier to do the hard things. Mm-hmm.
But you can just practice that in a really easy way. Like, it's just like taking a little bit of a mask off and letting somebody see who you really are. Because that's what it is. The fear is also around like showing people who you truly are, right?
We need to differentiate, I think, between masks that we're wearing and identities that we have. Because I think that it's okay to have multiple identities. Meaning, I'm a different person as a father than I am as a boss.
Sure.
And I'm not saying that the underlying principles and values aren't the same. They are. But the way that I act and the way that I show up is different. And that doesn't necessarily make it a mask. In fact, it's not a mask. And so I just want to make sure that people don't think they need to be exactly the same everywhere that they go.
No, I feel like a mask is more, it's like a costume that you put on to display something that you're trying to put out into the world. That's not necessarily you. Like I don't know, like if you're super sensitive, you walk into every room as somebody who's like really arrogant and loud.
How could somebody take a mask off? Like, what can you think of an example?
I mean, you can, if you have a friend that you trust or somebody like that, you can say it in conversation. You can say out loud, like, hey, I tend to walk around like this, but I really think I'm like this, and just see what they say. I don't think it's that simple. Like, I think there are layers to it. And I think sometimes you have to call the thing out and intellectually experience it. And then you can, to do it differently, actually do it differently, you have to be able to like feel it and live it in your body. And yet that's steps after the intellectual part. So the conversation, like just thinking about it first and then mentioning it to somebody and then maybe saying it out loud to multiple people. And then now you've experienced a potentially different side of you with other people or in a setting that you maybe were afraid of, and that you're building, you know, like new experiences of the real self. And then you can start to take it off in real life.
While we're talking about the Stoics, another one is what's called fear setting. Mm-hmm. So fear setting, that comes from Tim Ferriss, credit where it's due. It's been a long time since I've done this exercise, but if you Google Tim Ferriss fear setting, I'm sure it'll pop up. But basically it's writing out the worst case scenario. Like,
that's my favorite tool.
Like, if everything went wrong, this is what would happen, right?
We call that catastrophic thinking.
You put that down. And then on another page, you put down the potential upside. Mm-hmm. And it same as Seneca, right? That's where he got the idea. It just makes you see that, like, okay, the worst thing that could possibly happen, I'm still okay. And the best thing that could possibly happen changes my life. And when you see those things, it makes it a little bit easier to overcome that fear when they're right in front of you. Another fear that I think is worth mentioning is like a sort of sunk costs.
Yeah, that's a good one.
You mentioned that with your grad school course, like not wanting to make a change because you've put so much time, energy, and effort into a specific identity in your life.
I think that's a big one that we should talk about. I think that happens in relationships a lot too.
Like people staying in relationships because they're scared.
Or because we've put so much time in, or we've been together for so long, or we've done, I've worked so hard with this person instead. And sometimes that's great, but sometimes it's just not looking at the fact that it's not working.
Yes, you put a lot of time, energy, and effort into doing what you're doing. I mean, I'm shutting down a business after 7 years, and it was a lot, and it took a lot, and it is painful to shut it down. And I know that it is the thing that propels me forward in life.
The devil that is easier to deal with than the unknown. And we say it's sunk cost. That's what you're telling yourself. I put so much time and effort into it, but it's really like, I know how to function in this way. And if I do something different, I have to relearn. I'll just call out that talking about fear is making me anxious. Like, I've been so anxious this entire conversation. Have you?
No. No. I mean, I've been staring fear in the face in the recent weeks.
Yeah.
So maybe that's why it's just there for me right now. And the stuff that we're talking about is not stuff that I've mastered in any way, shape, or form. I want to be very clear there. I am in the midst of probably the most terrifying part of my life in the unknowing. Like, I just have absolutely no idea what is coming in the next 2 weeks even. I want to make sure that we're not minimizing that you shouldn't have fear, or that...
No, fear is important.
Yeah, fear is a huge indicator of what direction you need to head.
What part of, like, when you step into fear, what's the hardest part for you? So what I mean by that is, I have a really hard time with the first step, but once I'm in a really hard, scary situation, I'm good quickly. Like, I really can ride it out. But I don't think I think different people get stuck at different points in the process. Where do you get stuck?
I have a tendency to not let go of things, like to make things last longer than they should. I think it's fear of change and unknown.
Yeah.
Which is why this one's so bad for me.
Yeah.
Like the stuff that people are scared of normally, like that, I'm weird with that kind of stuff, like heights and guns and like that kind of fear is negligible for me. But the fear of being seen as a failure, I think are
the big ones.
The biggies, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think that if you think of fear as like something that's in the closet, I do really poorly when I'm standing in front of the closet and have to open the door. But as soon as I open it, I feel like I get really brave. Like, I really am good at walking into it. It's just like, maybe it's the unknown.
Thanks, everybody. That was great.